Hello, and welcome to 10 Very Big Books, a Malazan Read-Through podcast. My name is Peter Bond, and with me today is my friend and closest confidant, India Jones.
Hello.
Our producer, AJ Fileri.
Hello.
And last but not least, Joshua Dean Baker.
It's me.
And returning to the show, our esteemed guest for the 9th time to help us wrap up our read-through of the Malazan Book of the Fallen. It is the author and creator of Malazan Book of the Fallen himself, Stephen Erikson. Welcome back.
Hello.
How are you doing today? It's been a while. How fares 2023?
Not too bad. It's I've got a lot of projects I'm in the midst of, and at the moment I'm not seeing sort of a way I guess through all of them. So I'm gonna have to try to do one at a time, and it's going a bit slow. You know, it's summer, it's been hot. I've done some volunteering in various places away from writing. So
yeah, I think when we spoke to Cam on the live stream, he mentioned maybe you were volunteering at a dig or something like that.
Yep. Yeah, I was out in the wilds at that point.
How was that?
What does that mean?
What does that mean?
Yeah, like where were you in the wild?
14 kilometers from the nearest town, I guess, in a small river valley that had probably 11,000 years worth of occupation. And it was a small dig, but it was a lot of fun. But it was hard, physically hard. I hadn't realized how much digging had worn me out over the years.
When was the last time you had been on a dig before this one?
Probably 8-9 years in in Italy. But this was tough stuff, tough going for sure. But I loved it.
What brought you back after?
Oh, I just love getting out into the field and doing archaeology. It's my idea of a vacation.
Was this partnered with through like a university, or was this
Yeah, it was Brandon University was doing the dig in Manitoba.
Nice. Very nice.
That's awesome. I'm a little intrigued because I've read a little bit about what you're currently working on. I think I kind of knew that you were simultaneously working on multiple projects. But when you're talking about seeing a way through or trying to figure out maybe working on one project at a time, like how does kind of navigating that decision and that process look like?
Well, I mean, right now I'm writing No Life Forsaken, which is the follow-on to The God Is Not Willing. And it's this is why I'm sort of hesitant to describe progress, because it's kind of two novels, two complete and distinct storylines that I'm juggling at the moment. And I don't know if it's going to end up as two short novels, like 175,000 word novels, two of them, or one big one. But I've certainly concluded that I really hate writing trilogies. Absolutely hate it.
I'll go on record. I don't think there's ever been a good trilogy. Personally,
not a single one.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. What's gearing? I don't know. Getting in your gears about trilogies.
The middle book. I don't know. I mean, the 10-book series. I was on fire for that one, and so even though I knew that I had to wait till the 10th novel before I could sort of deliver the payoffs I wanted, there were a lot of things in between that I could, have fun writing. Trilogy is much more constrained. The second book is the bridge from the first book to the third, so it has a very specific function. And I kind of handcuffed myself because I made the second book occur on a different continent entirely from the first one. And then I have to sort of wrap the story around to basically bring some of the characters, at least, to the setting of the first one. And I guess in a lot of ways, a lot like Dead House Gates and Memories of Ice, that there are two novels running in parallel. And then you have to sort of pull them together, at least in time for the third novel. So that's kind of the challenge right now. And I know I've got maybe 300 pages of Walk in Shadow, so that's sitting there waiting for me. Plus, I have two standalone novels that I worked on during COVID, time travel novel, and then this other really strange little thing. So they're all sort of, hanging around.
Now, this matter of kind of bridging between 1 and 3, did you feel that? Are you feeling that too? Whilst when you worked on Carcanis, the Carcanis trilogy?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's where my growing dislike of trilogies began.
Is there a world, I don't know anything about publishing or, contracts or anything, but is there a possibility that this becomes more than a trilogy? Like, is that a possibility for you to just say, like, I don't want to do 3 books, I want to do 5 or something?
I could say that. We'd have to amend the contract, but it may be that there will be 4 books in this trilogy. Yeah.
Okay.
Now you didn't feel this way though, right? With Dust of Dreams, where that was you've said 2 and 1 kind of between the last 2 books, but they are so massive in scope. I feel like, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no, that was absolutely fine. I knew that was the cliffhanger novel because it was the first half of a very big novel.
Yeah, great segue, Josh. That was an early question I had about how, like, I know we've talked about earlier your vision for the entire series. When you thought about it the whole time, was 9 and 10 always? Did you always know the scope of that story would probably have to span across 2?
Yeah, it had to be. I mean, a reader is investing in the first 8 books. If it were the first 9 books before you get to the place where you can sort of set up the payoff, that last book would always, to my mind, always feel too short. Not enough to sort of sustain the momentum of the previous 9 novels. But doing it this way, knowing how the 8th book was going to end, 9 and 10 seemed to be the logical way of structuring the payoffs at the end. Because there is, I mean, the 9th book is a lot of setup for that payoff, and there's a lot that has to happen there.
I think it's interesting, like, I don't know, 2/3 or 3/4 of the way through Dust of Dreams, you can feel that momentum begin to kind of build. And, knowing we have another book, we know it's building into that last book. Was there any sort of like different mental space of writing 10, knowing that your foot was already on the floor? Like, and you didn't have to like build up really to anything because we already did a bunch of build up in the, 300,000 words before this.
I think there was a sense of once I finished the 9th book that I needed to do at least a small amount of pausing and refueling in order to carry through that storyline for the 10th book. So that was the time when I went to Mongolia and went on to that disastrous archaeology dig that nearly killed me.
Yeah.
So by the time I got back from that, and then I landed in London from Moscow right in the middle of the SARS epidemic, and I immediately got sick at that point.
No.
And so I'd already been sick in Mongolia, but then I got more sick, a lot more sick.
Yeah. In
the UK. But once that was sort of had cleared, then I did feel a definite sense of urgency. That any kind of brush with mortality will do that. And so I really wanted to make sure that I got the 10th book out, and that was sort of my singular obsession for that period, 8-9 months, something like that.
Did your time in Mongolia at all influence how you depicted like the Glass Desert in a lot of the Klance region?
No, I have to think about that. Not much of the landscape, I don't think. The Mongolian stepp's really interesting. I was in the north, okay, so I was not in the desert part. Thinking Gobi Desert and that kind of thing. That's a whole different landscape. This was quite a northern temperate landscape that actually had a lot more trees than I expected. Most of the hilltops still had trees, even though the Mongolian herders would be, I guess, almost every year harvesting some trees down to build their winter houses. So clearly they were doing it in a sustainable fashion because there was always trees to be found. So no, it was more, there are interesting physical details about that landscape, but a lot of it was very familiar to, say, Southwest Saskatchewan, where I'd worked, or even where I was this last summer in Southwest Manitoba. That valley that I worked at was very similar. You could have picked that up and stuck it in northern Mongolia, and it wouldn't have looked very different. The only difference was the creek that was running through the valley, I think was quite severely polluted. I didn't look it, but there's enough farmland around there that was probably pumping a fair bit of toxins in. Whereas in Mongolia, you could walk across the trout in those streams. There were so many trout, and trout need clean water. So that was different.
Speaking of Kalance, I was curious to just ask you a specific question about that area. I don't know if I could describe it well, but I do feel that the way you establish history and kind of build that region out, to me, is a little different than how you went about establishing the settings in other parts of the world. And I'd be curious if that was, something purposely you're doing, and maybe what kind of motivated you to approach that region in a different way.
You mean sort of east? East of Letheris?
Yes.
Yeah, where everything takes place.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted it to feel different in that it's kind of a godless environment. So some of that sort of natural, earth spirit kind of stuff that's present everywhere else would not be present here. And it was the absence of that life force, if you will, that left the civilizations that were present there so dysfunctional. Sort of like our world, where most of the West is in many respects a place without spirit. And there have been consequences to that environmentally. So it made sense that I would have to put the setting in something along those lines, and that would feel different. So I'm glad you caught a sense of a change there in terms of the landscape.
Speaking of the godlessness of that area, was the idea of having the Forcalasail god be one that was taken down by the Forcalasail, thinking that they know better than their god, was that inspired by anything specific, or is that kind of just like you were saying, this kind of generalized like Western, again, godlessness?
Well, I mean, a lot of the Western history in our world, the Enlightenment was very much, when you finally have philosophers pronouncing that God is dead, it has reached that certain point of thinking. So yeah, I wanted to explore that idea of worshippers actually overseeing the decimation or the end of their god and the end of their faith. And where would that take them from there? And it basically takes them to elevating each other or themselves to take over that role, which is disastrous because humans, even Forcalasail, are flawed.
Yeah. And there's this interesting kind of, irony in the Forcalasail in the end, trying to use the crippled god to, take his power and use it against the rest of the world. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I have other questions, but India, Josh, I did want to open the gesture your way.
I guess when you were wrapping up the series, how did you decide which characters that you wanted to bring to the end? Because there are so many main characters, like everyone kind of has their moment. So was it just like how their story ended? It just ended up there, or was there something more that you were thinking of when you were bringing it?
Well, because it's a 10-book series, and there's a sense of completion to the central arc or plot line. There was going to be no way to wrap up everybody's story, and nor would I want to, because the 10 books, just like Cam's 6 books, they're just excerpts from a history, an ongoing story, which is the story of the lives of all the characters. And so we visit them for a time and then we move on. But I think there's maybe I had a list somewhere of the characters that I needed to give a proper send-off to. And then it was simply a question of juggling things so I could do that in a fashion that kind of made sense. But also, by the time you're getting to the end of the book, I think by the time of the prologue or epilogue, I am structurally backing out of the series. So it's a mirror image to Gardens of the Moon's opening.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how it backs out.
When you made that list of things that of people that you have to end with, was it based on your favorite characters, or like just did you have to like I don't know?
I don't know about favorite, but more a sense of, okay, these are the ones that have earned their place on that on that last page, if you will, for themselves. And each of them would be representative of many of the other characters in the books that we didn't follow through to the end. So they sort of carry that extra burden, if you will. And then it was a question of really sort of slowing everything down to sort of immerse myself in those moments for those characters, and making sure that the writing did what I wanted it to do. And that was the thing that had me nervous. By the time I'd reached about the last, when I figured I had about 150 pages to go, I started getting very nervous because I had all these scenes that had been sitting in my head. Give you examples. Tavor on the battlefield and that final emotional release. I had that scene. I had the scene of the Marines on the hilltop and the lines they deliver when they start laughing. So these things were sitting there. And I had Gessler and Stormy and the two dogs and all of that kind of stuff. So then it was a question of, can the writing sustain my sense of the impact that I wanted to deliver? So it then became sort of almost a class in writing, the craft of writing. And that really slowed me down. And that was okay, because I think slowing down helped. I think it made it was the best I could pull off, basically. And it wouldn't matter, if it took me 2 hours to pull off a scene, taking 10 hours wouldn't have made any difference. The 2 hours were the best I could do. And so once I knew that, then I could move on to the next scene and all the rest. But there's also, the scene with the toys, with the children, which was early on.
Mm-hmm.
So those things are, you invest a lot in building up to those moments. And then when you get to those moments, then it's the self-doubt creeps in. Mm-hmm. And you got to fight that off and just try to think in terms of structure and sentence structure and craft and all the things that, as a beginning writer, were the first things and the hardest lessons I learned way, way, way back. And to actually, in a sense, return to that and stay disciplined enough to follow that through, if that makes sense.
As much as it could, But what else? Oh my gosh, there's one more thing I wanted to ask about this, but then I was listening and I forgot.
Well, India, what were your favorite scenes?
Easily Stormy and Gessler that was probably was the most surprisingly emotional scene that I felt, because I wouldn't have ever been yeah, those are the ones that I'm going to cry over. And I really loved the epilogue, especially, well, obviously I've always been obsessed with Absalar. I don't know what it was. I really don't. I just her journey, and then she was just gone. And I was damn it. So to have an actual, I guess, touch of an ending was really fulfilling. I do remember my question quickly.
Okay, good.
Thank you. You brought me back. So when you say you were kind of freaking out about 150 pages, was it because you only had 150 pages, or because you were I have so many pages?
No. I had no idea there was going to be 150 pages. What happened was, in the telling of the story, you're approaching those particular moments, and the closer you get, right?
How do you know? How do you decide?
Well, okay. I had to.
And this might be a weird question. I don't know if this is
No. Okay, so let's. Obviously, we don't have to worry about spoilers. Okay, so.
Yeah.
No, we don't.
No, we don't.
Yeah.
Nice.
Okay, so Tavor's scene after her speech to the regulars.
Oh, too good.
But also, it took a while to get to that point for obvious reasons. But I wanted the cracks to start showing, and I think the first crack shows when the children have come to the army, and she takes the knife that Tahol had given her. I think it was Tahol or Breeze, somebody, or Mail, actually.
Yeah, I was gonna say
the god Mail.
Yeah.
And she has a line, something along the lines of, haven't you bled me enough? I think something like that. So that's kind of the first crack in her armor. And so as one writes, you're setting these up to be incremental, and they're building to, that scene is the physical metaphor of the scream that's coming from her, right? So where she's physically wounding herself in an effort to, as an act of sacrifice. And so then I knew that I was going to have to bring her brother in, because I was planning on almost a repetition of the Felicin Tavor scene in the end of House of Chains.
Yes.
So I needed to build up to that point. But then between that, there's a scene where we get the other side of Tavor that is a lot more, I guess, surprising because it's so vulnerable. Where she complained, or says something about her matted hair underneath her helmet, I think. And that's where Fiddler, I think, is there. And he says something, and then he just goes off and weeps.
Mm-hmm.
So these were sort of the incremental moments that were all building up to that inarticulate cry that was going to be, I guess, at first and last in some ways, revelation regarding Tavor. And because I'd not done any of her point of view all the way through, I had to do it through these scenes like that. Mm-hmm. So from other points of view. And if you choose as your other points of view, to some extent, some of the most empathetic characters, then that reflects on her, at least for the reader. That's the hope anyways.
Yeah.
That some of the feeling that, say, Fiddler felt at that point is now directed towards Tavor. And so those things needed to be built into the character in order, at least to my mind, to make that inarticulate cry at the end as emotionally powerful as it could be.
I love all of the parallels that you're bringing up from like the beginning to the end, because obviously we did pick up on those, and it was so satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
The Tavor and Perrin, like, it's me. I'm not gonna kill you this time. So good.
Yeah, and her first words to her brother, of course, that was the other thing that was sitting there for years in my writing.
Really?
Yeah, because it was going to. The intent was it would force the reader into reevaluating everything that's gone before. Because by the time the reader gets to the end of House of Chains, fourth book, your understanding of Tavor is pretty limited and probably fairly negative. Even though she was faced with a choice of either seeing her sister executed or throwing the dice and getting her to the mines with Bowden there to ideally save her and retrieve her. And of course, that all goes horribly wrong. So that's set up so early on that there needs to be an answer to that thematically within the story.
Absolutely.
And so the last of the siblings is the one who has to, approach her. And that's the only person to whom she could say the words that she says, right?
Right.
That I lost her.
Yeah. What a moment.
That was, I think, especially for, I don't want to speak for Peter and Josh, but for me and AJ, I would say we really appreciated that scene.
I also appreciate it.
I thought it was very good.
You could have spoke for me.
I've been waiting for that
so have I.
That Tavor moment since book 4. And India, I don't want to be rude, but I will say you did really hate Tavor for a while after that.
Exactly. I needed that.
Good.
I needed
That's
that
good.
apology from Tavor. I needed closure from Tavor too.
Wow.
And I did get that. Like, that too was just insane.
Well, I mean, it's the most enigmatic characters are the ones that I think stay with the reader the longest, where you're not quite sure of their footing.
Yeah, they're just in your head.
Yeah, in your head.
Right.
And so it's this lingering question. And then if the story that you're reading can deliver those small telling details, not a lot of them, but just enough of them, so that when something finally breaks with that character and is revealed, it has the fullest impact.
Yeah.
I feel like Ganos being the only one she could really open up to is like, it just really it retroactively colors every other scene she was in before that, where she's not showing this kind of emotion to anybody, any of her closest people. Yeah. She just only needed her brother in that moment. That's just really, really powerful.
And that's foreshadowed because she shows it briefly to Fiddler. I'm pretty sure it's Fiddler. That's the lead up to that.
Yeah. I think staying with character stuff, but less like characters that we see to the end. There was a time, oh man, I don't remember if it was Midnight Tides or if it was like Bone Hunters when we were talking, where you said sometimes there will be a character who you are surprised continues like showing back up, or you're surprised by the things that they're doing within the story. And I think now that we're like done, all the whole series, is there any specific character that stands out to you as like kind of you being surprised at where they kind of ended up, or the things that they have done throughout like the series?
Yeah, I'd say Karsa for sure.
Really?
Oh, absolutely.
Really? You start a whole book 4 writing all about Karsa, and you weren't expecting him to end up where he ends up.
No, I did
murder
not
a god
expect
in the
him.
last 20 pages.
I did not expect him to end up where he ended up.
And how does it feel now writing a whole
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah.
thing? I know it's not entirely about it, but you take my point.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's in some ways, that's why I haven't even got to Karsa yet. That the first 2 books of the trilogy are not. There's discussions about Karsa, but even especially in the second book, the storyline is.
Josh doesn't know that. I think he's just learning.
I thought they were called the Witness books because it was all Karsa POV. That is what I had convinced myself.
Oh God, no.
Wow. All right.
No, there's no Karsa in the first 2 books.
That's insane to me.
Josh, honestly, I'm surprised you would expect that, having just read.
having read all of these. Yeah, you'd think.
Well, I mean, bear in mind the last time you saw Karsa was in the Crippled God.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That's a full circle too, because the dying man he picks up is the one that you meet in Memories of Ice.
AJ picked up on that. Yeah.
So fully tied into, I think it's Munug is his name, fully tied into the consequences of worshiping a wounded, crippled god.
Mm.
So, and Karsa, of course, rejected the crippled god when he had the opportunity to pick up Rulad's sword. So yeah, it was surprising that there was this other side of emotional maturity, I guess, in Karsa that came out in that final scene in the 10th book, and some of the things he says there.
Yeah,
and those things were kind of they're all. If you want to think of the thematic setup for the trilogy I'm working on right now, it's Karsa's last lines in The Crippled God. That'll be a hint for people. Maybe they can piece it together.
Yeah. That's so did you think, I mean, I guess to speak to you from 2000 and whatever it was when you were writing House of Chains, like where did you think Karsa was like just a House of Chains character, or did you feel like he would kind of like fizzle out?
Well, no, I knew he was going to face Rulad.
Okay.
Along with the Karim. So then it was a question of, well, if I'm going to bring him that far along in the story, I can't just completely drop him. He has to come back and haunt the pages for a bit longer. And then when he met Samar Dev, his storyline took off at that point. She was crucial. Although oddly, the scene in, what's it, Toll the Hounds, when he runs into that traveling slaving caravan.
That's Toll the Hounds.
And takes down the leader there.
Yeah,
that was a pivotal moment for Karsa's development. Because that's one where basically he didn't use his sword. He spoke the guy to death in a sense.
We never get to talk about that scene that much. The most Mad Max energy from a scene ever. It's so incredible. I want to ask a question. Now that we've gone through the whole thing, I think I asked the first few interviews a lot about your process, but now having seen it start to end, the 2 characters that I'm most obsessed with, I think, are Stormy and Gessler, because they're incredible, but more because I want to know if when you were writing, you wrote Gardens of the Moon, and then 10 years later, you wrote Dead House Gates. Did you think to yourself, I'm positive the answer is no, but it is you, so there's a chance. Did you think to yourself, well, they've got to go through the Warren of Talon because we're going to meet a witch later who's going to get really good at using the fire magic to kill the special creatures in book 10 to make way for the heroes to get to the top, but then we have to kill her, so they have to be immune to fire. Like, was that there, or did you just keep going to yourself, oh, I have a fix for that problem?
Man, I don't remember. Gessler and Stormy were interesting. I think they popped onto the page in Dead House Gates, right? That's where they show up. Yeah.
As two Marines. Marines. It is so casual about it.
Yeah, it's extremely casual. And they're in a bar, aren't they? And so they run into Duiker, I guess.
No, they run into Duiker and the mage.
Cult.
Yeah. That's his name.
Yeah. And something about them just sort of sunk its hooks into me. Their irreverence was something I wanted to revisit over and over again. And I, within Deadhouse Gates, I knew that they would eventually have a run-in with Coltane, and so I had to build up to that scene as well. So they're almost an elaboration on a joke Cam and I had that were running through all the books. It was just a back and forth joke about a recruiting officer in Gardens of the Moon at the beginning who recruits Sari, and he shows up as a incidental character going throughout the entire series, especially when we get later to Cam's books, where he's moved up the ranks, and I think by that point he's a fist or something like that. And every time magic happens, he just gets this ferocious headache, and so we just dropped him in there, and he sort of carries this. He's got his own story, none of which we ever describe, and we wanted to sort of play with that idea that there are characters all throughout history that can have fundamental roles in events that occur, but whose lives we know nothing about. And Gessler and Stormy were kind of an elaboration on that. So they were going to pop in and out, and then we'd close in closer when, through all their activities and actions, they are forced into a relationship with the Kachin Chamal. So yeah, there are plenty of sort of thematic elements that I attach to them. But I can't tell you, when I knew, what was coming. I don't remember. It's been way too long.
To be honest, I would have bet so much money that these were characters that had appeared in your games because so many of the characters who like have a secret, like, oh, they were an admiral back in the day, or oh, he was a general, are people that you've talked about having been role played. So I would have never guessed that they started off literally as two Marines, and at some point you went, well, no, they're going to give them a fun backstory. That's incredible to me.
That's the joy of the writing process, right? If everything had already been mapped out, I would have gotten bored and never finished the 10 books.
Of course,
right?
Yes.
I needed those open spaces for spontaneity, for new characters to just show up and raise hell and entertain me as I'm writing them.
Josh says like he can't read a book anymore now that is like actually like super interesting, I guess, because you could never anticipate what was going on in this series, and for that it's like think a lot more, and now a lot of things seem like a little bit more thoughtless. And that, well, maybe I'm paraphrasing, but for me, I read a lot of very, very I don't know, easy reads, I would say. And lately I've just been so disinterested because everything is just kind of like laid out and there's no real, like, I don't know, guess or challenge. And I never thought that I would ever in my life enjoy that, like thinking while I'm reading. But now, because this series was the only thing that I was reading for like years, I really wasn't doing much side reading. And now I'm finding myself in like a weird place where I don't really want to read anything. And it's not like, oh my God, I'll never read again. But it's like, what do I read now? Because I'm not fully skewed all the way to this fantasy side. Like, but I'm also definitely not in the place where I was reading like the same author who has the same story in like a different font,
in a different font. Right. Yeah. Well, okay. But those kind of stories, they have a value in and of themselves because it's the familiarity that is the comforting aspect to a lot of these stories. So I wouldn't dump too heavily on that. If you're recognizing the tropes and you're recognizing where it's going, there are other things that you can draw from that, from enjoying or draw from the story that you hopefully will enjoy. For example, characters who throughout a series somehow always manage to pull it off, whatever it is they're doing. That can be fun in and of itself, right? It comes down to sort of what it is you're looking for when you sit down to read, and that can change from day to day.
Yeah, I think that is what this did. Like, I think that reading this series did change what I'm looking for now in a story, which is bizarre because I just wouldn't have expected it. I wouldn't have expected to be like actually changed from read, like not like, oh my God, my life has changed, but like just like normal day-to-day things that I like are now like, well, maybe I like other things. I think it just opened my mind more, like, and expanded like what I'm interested in consuming. And it's
right.
cool.
Well, you could try Umberto Eco's Foucault's Pendulum if you want a real challenging novel, which is also extremely
challenging. How challenging, Steve? How challenging are we talking?
It's fun. It's a lot of fun, right? There's a tongue-in-cheek element that's running all the way through it in terms of the sheer absurdity of the complications of the storyline, because it's all about conspiracy, and it's about and it's the rabbit holes are just everywhere. It's a lot of fun.
I've opened the Wikipedia, India, and before you even get to the summary, there's many words that I don't know what they mean already.
Please, Steve, no, probably not.
Probably not. Oh, well.
Maybe I'll see. I'll take a recommendation from you any day. So,
well, there's some good science fiction. There's Adrian Tchaikovsky's, I think it's Children of Time.
Children of Time is so good.
It's such a good book.
Children of Time is so good.
AJ's been advocating that that's what we do next. If I'm being honest,
really
if I'm being honest on mic, that's what AJ wants to do next.
It's good fun, and I think he's now got 2 or 3 that followed on that one as well. Set in the same
something like that.
So
that's a great book.
So AJ's read every book in the main series?
No, I've only read I have the second one, and I'm actually probably going to read it on vacation when we go in a couple of weeks. But the first one is one of my favorite sci-fi premises, and the way that it approaches the storytelling.
What is it called?
Children of Time.
Yeah,
it's really great. I also sorry, now we're talking about Adrian Tchaikovsky for a moment. I would really highly recommend his novella, I guess, called Elder Race. Which is also just really, really great and kind of does a similar thing of the POV switching that Children of Time does. But Elder Race is like 130 pages or something. It's really short. It gets in and gets out and does exactly what it needs to do. And I had a great time reading that. But anyway.
That's another thing. I used to get so frustrated at the POV changes in these books. And now when there's just one POV, I'm like, what is everyone else doing and thinking?
Yeah.
I am reading a single POV book for the first time in, I don't know, 6 years, it feels like, and I am dying.
Yeah.
But I'm like making myself do it because it's been so long.
Yeah.
Literally.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah. I also had this kind of similar, like, we finished the series and I'm just like, well, now what? And part of me was like, do I just go back and start reading Gardens of the Moon again? I think it's really easy, especially over how long we read this series and how long it was like in our lives. I think it's really easy to that kind of become a consistency that you crave. And so I really can understand people reading this series like back to back to back.
Emotional security.
Right. Yeah. It's just like it is a consistent thing. And then once you read it once, you kind of know where it's going, more like the broad strokes story wise. And so you can kind of read it a little deeper, but I've been having the same thing. And I was like, I need to read something kind of more literary. So I've been slowly chipping my way through Blood Meridian.
Oh, wow.
Which is just so hard to read. It's short, but it is so dense.
Cormac McCarthy.
Yeah. Okay. And my brother had read it a couple of years ago, and I asked him, I was like, how did you read this book? He said, I read this one with this study guide. And he sent me this like study guide website for like every chapter that will kind of like, go back. Like there's like the No Fear Shakespeare books, which will like kind of break down, Romeo and Juliet and all that stuff in like layman's language or whatever. But so I'm on like chapter 3 and it's a lot, but that has kind of filled the void of like this massive kind of series with a lot of stuff in it. I've gone to a smaller book, but
yeah, well, you could try Don DeLillo's The Names. That's also that one's sort of nice way to bookend Foucault's Pendulum. And if you wanted to sort of stay in that vein, you could do G.K. Chesterton's The Man Who Was Thursday as a trio of conspiracy books. That might be a lot of fun.
Interesting. Conspiracy books sound very fun.
That sounds incredible.
This sounds like a thrill.
You said you've got multiple things going on right now. You've got, you're working on the Malazan stuff, the time travel stuff, your quote weird thing, which I'm very interested about. But what have you found yourself kind of consuming alongside that stuff? And do you feel like you're trying to consume stuff that is like on the opposite side of the spectrum from whatever you're currently working on, or are you kind of trying to pull inspiration from stuff?
I'm not reading nearly as much as I used to. And when I do read, quite often it's nonfiction. I've been watching a lot of documentaries, like a lot. So I'm not sure. I mean, when I do read fiction, it's usually science fiction. Generally, I like the stuff that's in space, getting me out there somewhere. And yeah, I guess, I don't know, for whatever reason, I'm not sort of being hypercritical. I'm just enjoying casual reading, which is relaxing.
I was gonna say, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and then like the time travel novel is a single point of view, so stylistically it's extremely different from the other stuff I'm doing. It's a fairly natural mimetic voice, beginning at least in this world. And then the other one is, the weird one. Yeah, I'm not going to talk much about that one.
Dang.
The weird one.
Yeah, it's extremely weird.
Yeah.
That's so tantalizing.
Only making me more interested.
Yeah. Well, no, but it's the plot is a simple adventure story, as you might have read in the 1920s.
Okay.
So very traditional adventure story, but it's talking about something a lot more complicated than that. So, but it's being told in a fairly straightforward fashion of just rip-roaring adventure. Think H. Rider Haggard's She, or People of the Mist, something along those lines, which, if you're going to go look at those things, I don't know if I'd recommend them. I picked up She. I have an old edition of She hardcover. And my God, the casual racism and misogyny and anti-Semitism is just, it's so much in your face. It was really, really hard to continue reading. So I kind of abandoned the effort.
I was going to say, Steve, I really appreciate that after talking with us 9 times, you still are hopelessly optimistic when you just drop titles like, like She. Sure. Who is she? Who are
one.
Yeah. Isn't there a term for books of that era, or am I thinking of that?
Yeah,
is
they're
is it Penny Dreadful, or is that just what that show is called?
No,
okay,
no,
am I very wrong? Thank you for the looks.
They're how would you describe them? They emerge from the era of white man's burden and exploration of, quote, deep, dark Africa. So you have a whole series of books like that. And H. Rider Haggard was one of the more popular and successful of them. So it's The Great White Hunter, usually finding lost civilizations. So even think of Conan Doyle's Lost World, that kind of stuff. So yeah, that was a whole sort of, it's kind of where the mindset of colonialism sort of works its way into sort of classic adventure stories. And I mean, you could probably include Kipling in some of that stuff, but you could also include Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. So, there's a full gamut of approaches to that stuff, and Burroughs and Tarzan and all of these books, which are deriving mostly from H. Rider Haggard and Harold Lamb and Talbot Mundy and all these people, who are basically using other parts of the world as exotic locales for their white adventurer to come, storming in and save the day.
Thank God.
Yeah.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. So they are certainly they are of their time. Let's put it that way.
I might be not into those. I don't know.
Yeah.
I might pass, actually.
Well, you only made me more interested in it. Let the record show.
In the weird.
In the weird?
The weird book, not this stuff.
Not this in particular, but I could, I don't know. It sounds like an interesting thing to interact with.
Yeah, well, it's a novel that's specifically commenting on
and
that.
That's what I was imagining.
Yeah, on that canon. Yeah.
I guess I think about the concerns of this series and how you approach them. And I was like, oh, I'm sure you would approach the concerns around this type of genre of fiction in a potentially interesting way.
Yeah, and this is why some documentaries have been really interesting. Do you know it's on Netflix? Lee Berger's, who is a paleoanthropologist. This is a site, and it's called Rising Star Cave in South Africa. Do you guys know anything about that?
No, I do not.
No, man. But the documentary
Dawn of Humanity.
There it is. Okay.
From Nova.
No, I don't think that's it. It's definitely on Netflix.
Maybe Unknown Cave of Bones.
That's the one.
Oh, there
that
it
is just
I see it.
That's an absolutely amazing documentary. And it basically poses the question of, where does humanity begin? Because this particular hominid species is one that becomes extinct, but it's coexisting when modern humans are around. And yet it seems to be displaying, despite having, the brain capacity not much larger than a chimpanzee, it's displaying culture, like actual definable culture. And that really raises the question of these things that we, as anthropologists or whatever, or even beyond that in biology, that whole notion of what constitutes humanity. And generally it's defined as evidence of culture of some form or another. So art, ritual treatment of the dead, and you go back a bit further, tool making, stone tool making, all that kind of stuff. So these are sort of the signposts to sentience and humanity as such. And yet it's turning out that we're not the exclusive owners of those aspects of behavior. And so that's pretty mind-blowing. And so that's kind of thematically sort of where I'm exploring with this weirdo novel.
Steve, if you were given, if someone said, I'm going to pay for you to take 2 years, go off and think, come back with one, what do you think do you have any ideas of where you'd want to do a documentary about? Or,
documentary?
Yeah. If they just, someone
Good
said,
question.
go for it in, educate whatever, stripe of humanity watches it. What are you educating us on?
Wow.
That's a hard question.
Yeah.
I'm very sorry.
I'm not sure. I guess probably it would be archaeologically oriented in some fashion. Yeah, I mean, I have a strong suspicion that some of the most interesting stuff that we could find related to the people of the New World, quote unquote, is all underwater. It's all off the coast. And so that kind of exploration is not an easy thing to undertake. But there's also elements of rock art that I suppose interest me. I originally thought it would be fun to do a comedic historical documentary where I just make shit up.
Oh, okay. Incredible.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry to say, I don't know if we have the funding to back.
Yeah, we can work on it. We can work on it.
If I may loop around,
Sure.
I did want a quick touch on 9 and 10 again.
Oh, what, Malazan?
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a little played out.
All right, I'll just see myself out. All I was going to say is to kind of build on the something you said about sentience and kind of like attributes of sentience that maybe are not exclusively held to humans. It made me think about those themes in 9 and 10, not just relating to Kachin Shamal, but relating to other non-human characters in the book and animals. And I was curious about why maybe you chose to kind of explore those ideas in 9 and 10 and what life looks like outside of humans.
Oh, wow. Well, there's a lot of sort of almost science fiction related to Kachin Shamal, right? So, one has to sort of figure out, okay, how are basically velociraptors or raptors of some kind, dinosaur-style raptors, how will they be able to communicate? Because they don't have the larynx and the vocal cords or the mouth apparatus, the throat apparatus to do anything apart from the equivalent of bird song. So are there other ways in which to communicate? And so that's where that whole idea of almost following along the lines of insects and ants and the release of pheromones and all the rest as a means of subtle communication. And so, when you build that up, then you realize that the means of communication is going to shape that culture fundamentally. But also there's that idea of, and I've seen this actually now in some more recent science fiction novels where you've got alien species that have a single breeding mother, similar to a queen bee.
Mm-hmm.
And then they are able to create bespoke offspring. So, some as workers, some as soldiers, some as drones, some as, nest servants and that kind of thing. So, in other words, genetically altering the nature of their offspring to specific tasks. And that's where the Kachin Jamal Kel hunters came from. So it was just basically trying to build up a non-human civilization and trying to figure out how is that actually going to work, especially without magic. So there's a lot of science fiction elements to that kind of stuff. As for, I guess in the 9th and 10th books, are you referring to the wolves, for example?
Yeah, I think about wolves. I think about Bent and Roach, and I just think about some other passages that stand out to me. They're not at my fingertips, though. So
yeah, I've always been interested in the nature of domestication and how that actually comes about. So regarding wolves, dogs, all the rest, and the compact, if you will, that is established between humans and another species, and how quite often it's, at least initially, it's beneficial to that other species, but the human attitude towards that species indicates that it's, in the long run, it may not be beneficial at all. So, riding a horse into battle, you've domesticated this animal and it carries you, and then you take it into harm's way without a second thought. And, to what extent is its understanding of the situation relevant at all to the actions that humans engage in? And I guess the brutal answer would be not relevant at all. But dogs, they're interesting. They're interesting. And my experience of that is from the archaeology I did on the plains. When you're dealing with pre-horse cultures, archaic period, that kind of stuff, where, there was a site called the Gray site in Saskatchewan. It was exposed when a dust storm just sort of stripped all the topsoil away, exposing all these bones. It's a 4,000 to 6,000 year old site. And it was kind of the details are kind of shocking. The men were ritually buried in fetal position on the hilltop. And the dogs that they had domesticated, basically the dogs at that point would be taking the place of horses, in the sense, not that you ride them, but they drag things, they carry things, they pull things. And so all their vertebrae would be compacted because they've been pulling heavy weights behind them. But those dogs were ritually buried as well. So given a very high status within that particular culture. And what was appalling was that the women and children were basically thrown off the edge of the hill.
Perfect.
So they weren't ritually buried at all. And so that points to a particular type of culture which is not quite painting the blissful noble savage notion in a good light. So these things are what interests me and what I like to explore when I'm writing fiction.
Oh, that's very interesting. I have another question about 9 and 10, but I guess I was bullied by my co-host.
Ask the question.
I did want to check in to see if anyone else had any 9 and 10.
I just want to say maybe the favorite thing I've ever read, and I have no thought other than telling you that as you're aware, Steve, you can write a darn good book when you put your mind to it. The Spinach Durov pounding people's shields so hard that they just fall, and then someone takes their place, all just so his speech is that much cooler, is my favorite thing I've ever read. There is no like academic reason. It just makes my heart sing, and I love it so much. And it's fantastic.
That's interesting. Yeah, we haven't even mentioned the whole the shore
and everything.
That's what my next question is about.
It's because it's its own book, Steve.
Yeah,
and you were like, well, I guess I just need to throw it in here and it's so good.
It's really good. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know how you made me care about pithy and brevity, because I didn't think about those two. And then all of a sudden, I would have died for them.
What I was gonna say was about this very thing. I think the first time I read through the book, the 9 and 10, I was a little at sea about why the Carcana stuff was in there, and I've spoken about that, and I didn't necessarily connect with it. This time, I was all eyes on Carcanas the whole time, and in fact, I was most interested in that element of the story, and I was curious. I mean, I really enjoyed it, and I was curious about maybe not necessarily why you included that storyline, but I was curious about, because if I'm not mistaken, at the time you knew that you were going to write books about Carcanus, and I was curious about how that, if there was an influence there, or how that affected it, or whether this Carcanus storyline was always a part of your vision for the ending.
No, I don't think it was. I think it was generated when I was writing Toll the Hounds. And I think when I introduced the character of Endis Salan and Spinnock and a few others, there was something compelling about them that was, and their backstories started to sort of haunt me. I knew I had to deal with Mother Dark's turning away, and that's what Toll the Hounds was all about. And I would have to make a conclusion of that particular sequence and cultural history for the Taistandi. But no, those characters then, they kind of captivated me. And then the fact that they were talking and reminiscing about Carcanus, sort of, it felt like there was enough there that if I wanted to delve in there, into that storyline, that back history, I could do so. And then when you get to the whole shoreline stuff, the character, oh man, I can't remember his name. Who's the guy with the sword?
Are you talking about Yed and Derek the Watch?
The Watch?
Yeah, that's it.
The guy with the sword.
The Watch. Too many years.
Sure.
He just exploded onto the page as this really interesting, terse character. I remember knowing somebody who was a jaw grinder. You know what I mean? He'd be so constrained in his behavior, regardless of his emotions, that you could hear his teeth grinding.
Oh, jeez.
Right, and it built the muscles up around the jawline and stuff, which changed the shape of his face and everything. And I always thought that was kind of interesting as a physical detail that really can indicate that there are volumes behind all that silence and that inability to sort of engage with other people. And so I threw that in to help sort of plant that character when we first see him on another shore, the shore of Lotheris, which of course foreshadows. It turns out foreshadows the shore that he eventually goes to. So yeah, he just sort of took off. And then the Hust sword, I realized that I could write whole freaking novels just on the Hust weapons.
Yeah, there's so much there. They're so cool.
And so there was suddenly, it all started unfolding that I had plenty here that I could post 10-book series that I could delve into, which is what the Carcanus trilogies ended up doing. So yeah, it was preparations for that trilogy occurring on the page of a 10-book series, and yeah, kind of running in parallel. But then the final scenes of Yed and Derek and Twilight and all of those characters then became almost a dreamscape for Carcanus stories through one character. I don't know if you guys have read the Carcanus stuff yet, but
not yet.
Through one character, anyways. That character ends up having visions of the very scenes you've just read, on that shoreline, and they're blending. The sense of time is breaking down, but the place remains the same. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff that happened there. And yeah, that march of Spinnock Durab. I mean, I guess I just wanted that cadence, that savage beat that was sort of representative of everything that the Taistandi had lost for so long. That kind of energy that was backing their determination to do something was simply all gone. But this, of course, is post Toll the Hounds, so it's being resurrected and reborn in them. And so Spinnock, he uses the sword on the shield to wake that stuff up.
I know we spoke about it a little before. I would be curious specifically about the Carcanus trilogy, and I'd be curious to know whether if there was any knowledge that you feel like, or lessons you learned from ending this series that you feel like you are keeping in mind as you approach wrapping up the trilogy and potential not trilogy about Karsa?
No, I get the lessons one learns writing 10 books, 3.25 million words, whatever. I can't really see a way of pulling that across to a trilogy. They're very, very different lessons because you're investing for the long haul. And some people may think of trilogies as a long haul, but I don't. So it seems short. And so I've actually been constraining my style to make even the volumes of the trilogies shorter than my average pre-existing 10-book series, shorter than all the other books. And it may be a product of age as well. Maybe I'm slowly, winding down or burning out. But I don't feel obliged in any sense to deliver a 300,000 word novel ever again. So it took a lot out of me. So now I guess it's more as if having done the 10 books, I'm now taking a different approach to novels in general, and they are more pithy, I guess, and brevity.
Hey,
oh, there it is. There it is.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think in terms of you said maybe you're winding down or whatever. You may be, but I would say the amount of people making content, quote unquote, about the Book of the Fallen specifically, I feel like has only increased in the last few years. Has that been a weird kind of
very
circle to square in terms of I finished these books in 2011 and now I'm kind of moving on to other stuff, and now all of a sudden 10 years later people are like, hey, it's this series I'm reading, let's read it along, because you're very involved with that stuff. Yeah. So you're at least passively consuming some of it, I would imagine.
Oh yeah. It's peculiar.
Yeah.
And I've been watching the DLC
with Jeff and Lana. Yeah.
Oh man, they are so they're funny. They are funny.
Yeah.
An absolute blast to be watching. And so there's a nostalgic element for me to just get a sense of people experiencing these books for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And in many respects reminding me of stuff that I'd done that I'd since forgotten.
Sure.
Lots of details. So yeah, I'm constantly astonished that the series seems to be at least displaying enough longevity that will at least hopefully outlast me.
Yeah, I would say a lot of the themes and stuff throughout the books, and even probably themes that you didn't even mean to put in the books, I think are widely applicable for an extended lifetime or lifespan.
I mean, the intent was always to be as timeless as possible.
Sure.
Right. But there's only so much you can do because, language itself changes and evolves.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a great example of when I pulled down that H. Rider Haggard, which I guess was written in 1914, something like that.
Sure.
No, actually maybe 1907, somewhere around there. And the opening line, I read it out loud to my wife and then reread it as an edit. And, I reduced it to six words. It was 25 words, 30 words.
Sure.
And that's what happens is we contract with language. And so stylistically, everything will eventually date itself in some fashion or another. So there's really no escaping that kind of stuff. But thematically, you're right. That should be timeless. That should be universal. And certainly when you look at, the works that have survived in literature, it's for that reason. There is a universality in his examination of the human condition that stays with us.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I'll read him again. That's something.
Yeah. Do you have any? So we got done with our live stream and there was a lot of talk about rereading. Do you have any? I'm obviously you've never read your own books, I guess. I would assume not. Yeah, no. So, but I'm sure many people have talked to you about the rereading process. Is there any words of wisdom you would impart on someone of things to try and engage with in a different way on their second read through of the series?
Well, I think you mentioned it early on. The fact that what's coming means you don't have to, spend a lot of sort of mental energy trying to predict or trying to work out, how things fall into place and all the rest. So with rereads, you can remember I very early on, I described this as the world's longest short story because that's kind of how I wrote it. So in the same fashion that one might read a short story, you pay a lot more attention to the language. And so on a reread, you're kind of invited to do just that. You can spend time on the language. And then have more interest in sort of the subtextual stuff that's going on, the establishment of symbolic details of setting or whatever. And then you can see how those things can loop around and all the rest. And that stuff's all going on in the background when, while on a first read, you're attaching to the plot specifically,
right,
to find out what's going on.
Right.
Not just the plot, but also those world building details that allow you to sort of ground yourself in the story. But if that stuff's already present within you, then find all the places where I did a blatantly obvious foreshadowing. But of course, it would never be obvious because if you're reading it the first time through, you're not aware of what's being foreshadowed and
right.
not.
Right. Mm-hmm. Josh had brought up the live stream, and as you're aware, we had talked to Cam a bit, which was a great conversation, by the way. It's great to talk to. And he had mentioned that you might be gaming currently. You might be in a tabletop game at the moment, or you were really? At the time, or is this a surprise to you?
No.
No, he just made that up.
Okay.
Okay, because he said that, and I was like, oh, wow, that's really interesting. Like, I had thought to myself, because I remember talking to you some other time, and you were like, yeah, I don't really know if I have the time or energy really to role play.
No, I don't.
But
I don't.
No, I don't.
That's very funny.
No, I don't know where he got that from, but yeah, it does sound like he just made it up.
Well, all right, there's that whole question then. Yeah, I'm fresh out then.
I am about to. I have some kind words I'll say, but I did want to ask my co-hosts if they had anything else in their mind other than questions.
No, I mean, I think we said it before we started recording, but I mean, Steve, thank you so much for donating your time to the show. It was really, especially when we had only released 8 episodes talking about the first book. Being so generous with your time then and continuing to be so throughout. You
mean you didn't mind me showing up and chewing you guys out every now and then?
No, please.
I think it builds character.
Well, no,
character development.
I think that stuff's good because I certainly didn't want to, for the most part, think really hard about you listening to the show because I just wanted to, give honest opinions and feedback. And Pete and I had talked a lot, and I guess all of us had talked a lot about how the show is about our experience reading through the series, regardless of whether, we are currently enjoying a piece of it or not, or whatever, regardless of who's listening. So, but no, I appreciate you coming on and being as honest about your feelings as we were about ours. I think it's only fair. So I think that stuff was really, it was always great to talk to you, whether you were chewing us out or not. That's all I'll say.
Try to imagine getting halfway through or stopping at book 6 and thinking of your takeaway at that point, if you were to not continue reading, versus your takeaway having completed the 10 books. Because it's one of the things that, was always my hope was that the reader would stay with me, because the answer to so much of the previous 8 books is found, or 9 books is found in the 10th. And so if you never get to that, then you only got sort of half of the experience,
right?
Which leads you in a completely wrong direction,
right.
as you guys know, right? Because the ending takes that tragic element and flips it on its head. I mean, there are tragic things occurring, but ultimately it's not about failure, it's about success.
I would say if I legitimately stopped after book 6, I think your thesis of it's a bunch of short stories would be my main takeaway, because I think I would really struggle to see. I think book 6 is a great book to pose that at, because I really don't think I would have any meaningful connection I could make to span all 6 books at that point. I think I would just be left with like a series of vignettes.
Yeah.
Very good vignettes, but I would be like, well, that happened. I don't really know what to make of it.
Yeah.
Which is crazy that 3/5 of the way through the books, you have absolutely no idea where you're going. Which, to be fair, after book 8, I didn't know we were going either. So
Yeah.
But I think you're right, Josh. I mean, 7 is kind of where we start. We
exactly.
bring Lethrus into like the present day,
yes.
and then we tie all that stuff in. So I think you're right. That 6 is a good spot to be like, what if I stopped before I actually knew why 5 was there? Besides to be like Troll Sengar and also just like a very good book. But
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think when we talked to AP had also expressed that kind of frustration of like, you're expressing these feelings about a thing that'll be answered in the next chapter. And like, that's clearly, I think a flaw of the show, and maybe just a flaw of kind of talking about works like this in general, is like, there will always be a point where you're not, unless it's like a movie or something where you can kind of watch the entire thing at one time. It's like, you're always going to be talking about a thing without having the entire picture in front of you. Right.
Yeah. I think it's a very, slippery thing because of the show's nature of what we're doing is like quasi us talking through our feelings. But of course, there is a part that is like maybe perhaps shoddily done, but still done analysis or commentary. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think if you're just talking through your feelings about a work, I think that makes a lot of sense, even if you're commenting on something that isn't the whole picture, But I think if you're like making an argument, so to speak, it becomes like there's very little ground to stand on. And I think that's what's tricky, is that the show sometimes is doing multiple things at once, and it is not always clear. I don't know if it was always clear whether we were, just talking through a feeling we had, or we're like making an argument to like put forward, So, it was definitely interesting, as AJ said, when we talked to AP about this idea as well, And I guess it's just part of the format of it. Honestly, when I talked India and Josh into reading the books, I guess I didn't know how much we had thought about this specific concept, you know?
I think that's just a general larger content thing of like not really realizing what it will turn into in 5 years, because none of us had done anything like this before, and it was kind of impossible to really know what was going to happen.
Yeah. And if I'm going to be honest, I think, coming from me and Josh, who spent most of our time performing classical music and making it, it's like a very strange thing to be making like art about art. Like essentially it's like a type of, like, closest thing I could call it is criticism, but I would not use that word, and don't think we're engaged in literary. I don't think that really accurately describes what's going on. But it's this huge, huge phenomena, and it's everywhere. And it's like this weird, almost, I don't know, like having, I feel like sometimes like someone else is digesting something for you in a way. I don't know. It's a very strange type of content that exists. And
Are you talking about this podcast?
But it's a whole genre. It's not just, but like,
I see.
It's an interesting thing in relationship to a work of art, It
is, yeah.
I think we're all just trying to make make sense of it in our own way and sharing it because it's fun to talk about.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. How long's it been? 5 years?
5 years. Yeah.
I thought about it. Yeah. I think we would have talked we talked in 2019 for the first time in 2019.
Yeah. We had started the like ideation and like test episodes of the show toward the end of 2018, and then started releasing episodes the beginning of 2019 somewhere.
And I think we spoke to Steve for the first time in the fall of 2019, right before I moved to Japan, or maybe I was in Japan. I forget.
Cool. It was
before.
For 4 years. 4 years.
No, I think it was after, because I think we had started our read through of Dead House Gates, and then because just the way the dates lined up, I think we'd started Dead House Gates and then talked to you for the first time in that fall. Yeah. So yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah.
But I mean, obviously you have come on and disagreed with us, which I won't lie has definitely created some constant like worry in me, definitely thrown me off the first time you got on mic and were like, hey, that was my impression.
Verbatim.
That's what it was.
Yeah, I was very surprised, if I'm being honest. But, I think, it was so welcomed, especially considering we were very honest on the show about our responses to your work. And I think it was nice that you were so honest and, generally very patient and kind with us, especially considering, what we had talked about. And, there's lots of things I've said that I don't think hold up on the show. And I think, there's other things I do stand by, but for me, it was always great to interview you. And that was certainly welcomed,
Yeah, definitely.
And was the whole endeavor worth it?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
That's my answer.
Yes.
100%.
Yeah.
I already liked the books, though. That was, I was an easy sell.
I refer to this podcast as the most constant thing in my life for the past 5 years. And I stand, and this book series, it just, it got us through a lot of different life events. And I don't want to just bring it back to that. But it has been probably one of the most rewarding experiences that we've done. And it made so many connections, and getting to know you was really cool. Like having you on our show and being able to be like, yeah, and the author also comes on has been
yeah.
It's just it's been really surreal. And I also never thought that you came on the show and yelled at me. So
No, I didn't.
never me.
No.
Never say he yelled at
never
us.
yelled.
Yeah,
Never
I would
yelled.
say he would never yelled at us, but
No.
Maybe not you guys, but me.
not you for sure.
But yeah, and it's just been it's been really interesting, coming out of my own really small shell of what I was interested in, and opened me up to an entire world and community that I never would have been exposed to.
Yeah.
And
Well, I was really worried at the beginning when you were doing the audio. I was like, oh my God, the audio of Gardens of the Moon. How on earth, Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend it.
No, I wouldn't either.
Yeah.
And
second time through, third time through, fine.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But first time through,
Yeah,
It was never meant to be. It was never meant to be an audio. It was never meant to be performed as such. Right?
And yeah. Hindsight is 2020, Steve.
Famously so.
Yeah.
AJ, Josh, you have anything else you want to add?
No,
it's been a Go ahead, AJ.
But
Maybe one more thing.
I would definitely say it's like it was a worthwhile experience. I think I got a minor in college, in a media criticism, which just means I watched a lot of movies and then talked about them. Cool. So this was like a really nice outlet for that, post graduation and stuff. And
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I mean, like India said, I think this kind of whole thing of like. Our casual interactions or whatever you want to call them, just like having you on, it's a totally surreal thing. And like, not that I never thought I would talk to a New York Times bestselling author, but I don't think I ever thought I would talk to a New York Times bestselling author who has written a 10-book, 3 million word series, but I think also like just about the community really quick, like from the get-go, like from episode 1, we had always been in the triple digits of listeners, which was
cool,
absolutely mind-boggling, because Pete and I were like, if we get 100 listens in 2 months, we'll be happy with that. And I think after the first episode, I think we had 180 listens the first day, and it's gone up since then. But that was like the community around this series, and I think just like the community of like fantasy novel enjoyers in general is so large when you can tap into it. But I think if I hadn't done this show, I don't think I would really have ever tapped into that side of the global community or whatever. So it's been really great and really rewarding in a lot of ways. Talking to you, being on that list. So
yeah, long journey.
For you, Steve, you talk to different people about your work often. Does that ever, I don't know, like we're just like another podcast kind of like ending, but you're still going to go on and you're still going to have these conversations. So does it feel like, I don't know, like an ending in a way, or does it just, this is just like the show goes on for Steve?
Well, it's a bit of both, but it's impressive that you you stayed with it and you stayed disciplined all the way through, and read those chapters and discussed those chapters and kept coming back to it, and always fascinating to see those things that caught your eye, that worked, if you will, and then the things that didn't. Right? I mean, these are all things that I put away in the back of my mind when I sit down to write something new. The chances of something working versus not working. That kind of feedback it's crucial to a writer, and it's not the same as a workshop, like a writing workshop, because in a writing workshop, those other students are not your readers. They're not. Yeah. They're just not. Whereas when you're producing a work and then it comes out and it gets to the fans and the fans read it, in so many respects, their observations, their comments are infinitely more valuable and valid.
Totally. Because
they are fans of that genre. So, and yeah, I mean, I was aware from the beginning I was going to be shaking some of that stuff up, because I was going after some tropes and having fun with them. And some people take those tropes very seriously, far more than I did. And that, there was going to be fallout for that stuff. But the interaction with fans and readers, like I say, it's so much more useful. It's so much more useful. And it's not just that, you're there seeking praise. No, it's more, what are the things that are of interest and catching hold of the readership? And has that changed over time? And I think it has, actually. I think people coming to the series now are not at the stage you guys were at when you first came to the series, because the world has moved on. So there's a lot of life experience that you're bringing to it, especially as you're getting towards the end of the series. You guys have been doing this for long enough, so it becomes valuable in that respect. And so for me, it's more like with each new pairing or group or people doing an analysis, it's a reset. Yeah, it's a reset.
Well, it was an honor to give feedback, I suppose. Although I would deign to elevate our position.
I would love to see myself in a writing workshop.
But listen, the show was an absolute joy to make, and talking to you was just one element of it, including our conflicts. Your work has been tremendously meaningful to me. I think about it all the time in many ways, spiritually, politically, the list goes on. And it was a joy to share it with my friends. I'm sure I will wax nostalgically even more in our next final episode. But
final episode.
Final.
It was truly a blast to talk to you again today, Steve. Yeah. And I just want to reiterate, thank you for all your time and all the conversations we've had. I think about lots of them all the time, and I'm sure I won't forget this one. It was really great to talk to you today.
Yeah.
Well, it's my pleasure.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. It was all right, pleasure. Everyone.
This feels so crazy. We
have one more episode. That'll be out soon. Thank you for listening, and thanks again. Unless there's anything else,
can we just do a compassion with Steve?
Oh, whoa.
What does this mean?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
it's gonna get a little sensual.
We chant compassion as a kind of joking end to the
You're
show.
Gonna see it. Just do it, Peter.
Wait. You're describing this as a very strange thing.
Yeah, it's
literally at the end of the show, Peter says, when I say come, you say passion, come. And then we say passion.
And that's how
and that's it. But do you watch Big Brother, Steve?
No.
That would have been the reveal of the century.
I was never more confident in anything that Steve wasn't watching Big Brother.
Why? Steve loves strategy.
There's a lot of strategy in that show. That's true.
But
I'm sure there is.
I'm rolling.
Yeah.
You don't love reality television?
At what cost? At what cost? For real.
Well, at the end of that show, Julie says, "Be kind to each other," and. So it's just kind of like that.
Is that why we say it?
No,
when you think about it, that's really what this show and series has been about.
Empathy.
There you go.
Empathy.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's so true. That's so true.
I would agree. It's the best in us.
Yeah.
Seeking the best in us.
So with that, Steve, you don't have to join the compassion.
Yeah, we'll do one, but you don't have to. Yeah.
All right.
I'll just witness.
Okay. Perfect.
Nice.
Perfect way. No, that's great. All right, Pete, let's go.
When I say come, you say passion. Come.
Passion. Hello, everybody. Producer AJ here. It has been a minute. First, I just want to say thank you so much to everyone who came out to the Stream of the Fallen when we streamed last month. We raised over $5,000 for pro literacy to help fund adult literacy programs worldwide with your help. If you missed the stream, don't worry. You can still watch the video of it on our YouTube through the link in our show notes. Thank you again to everybody who tuned in and donated. It really, really means so much that we were able to do something like this with this platform, and we just really, really appreciate it. Anyway, to the normal credits now. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. And of course, thank you again to Steven Erikson for being so generous with his time over the last 4 years. Truly a wild experience to get to chat with you so many times. Thank you. If you would like to give your thoughts or feelings about this or any of our episodes, you can always email us 10verybigbooks@gmail.com, tweet us at 10verybigbooks, or you can head on over to our Discord, bit.ly/VBB Discord. That's capital V, capital B, capital B, capital D, Discord. That link will be in the show notes. Thank you to all of our wonderful patrons over on Patreon. Quick note, we will be suspending payments over there for the next couple of months, so if you haven't gotten a chance to get in there to listen to any of the patron exclusives, now would be the time to do that for free, because we will be deactivating taking the payments from you for the next couple of months, but the content will still be there. Don't tell anybody. We'll also be releasing some of that stuff publicly, I think, but that's to be determined. Anyway, if any of that sounds like something you want, you can head on over to patreon.com/10verybigbooks. Again, that link will also be in the show notes. And as always, thank you so very much to Dan Gesberg for making our spectacular cover art. You can follow him on Twitter at @A_W_DanG for the sound of a tumbleweed being blown through town by a dry desert breeze. Thank you as well to resident, my very good pal and friend, Scout Wilkinson, for the special art she has provided for this last season, as well as creating the final podcast art that will grace your feeds henceforth. You can see that in your podcatcher presently. It's great. We love it, and we're so excited for that to be the final art of the series. You can follow her on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Tumblr, all at Humble Goat, and you can see more of her work and commission her, provided that they are open, on her Coffee page at ko-fi.co/humblegoat. And of course, the wonderful music in today's episode is by the one, the only Amaranthin from his album Simulant Rain, which you can find along with all of his other music on bandcamp.com. Links to all of their pages will be in the show notes, and 10 Very Big Books will be back next week, provided our recording schedule holds up, on September 8th with our real, actual, final, last episode of 10 Very Big Books, the TVBB series mailbag and wrap-up. We'll be recording that next week, hopefully, provided nothing changes. So if you have questions, comments, stuff you want to get into us, hop into our Discord. We have the channel open there. If you want to tweet at us, if you want to email us, we will be pulling from all of those places. So you have until September 5th to get that stuff in. And then the episode, hopefully, will be out on September 8th. If any of that changes, we'll post it on our socials and in the Discord. So keep an eye there. All that being said, I'll talk to you then. And thank you so much for listening.